Welcome to the Tim Ahlman Podcast. Pray the love, joy, and light of Christ is yours today as I get to hang out with a brother I just met. Jordan Vesling has been a longtime fan, and I shouldn't say fan. Well, fan of the ULC, a lot of the work we're doing, and listens to a lot of podcasts. And from time to time, Jordan sends me some of his friends in the Texas area, and today I get to talk with one of Jordan's friends, John Rector. Let me tell you about him. Born and raised in Central Illinois, where he came to Christ at an early age. He's married to Shanna. They have 3 kids, 9 and down to 4. It looks like a boy and 2 young ladies, and that's exactly like me too. John's finishing his master's degree in Christian leadership at Dallas Theological Seminary. He holds his bachelor's degree in leadership and management from Lincoln Christian Seminary. He's been a pastor, church planner, nonprofit executive director. And John recently became certified as an executive leadership coach. We're going to talk about this in 2018 on the Maxwell Certified Leadership Training. He's trained as a coach, a speaker, behavioral consultant in 2024. He currently serves as the area director for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes in Austin, Texas, and he professionally trains and coaches leaders in ministry and in the marketplace through his company, Rector Leadership. You can find out more at rectorleadership.com. His personal mission is to live on mission for the glory of God and for the good of our communities. How you doing, John? Thanks so much for being with us.
Doing great, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. Let's get into ministry in general. This is a leadership podcast. We got a lot of listeners. You were talking about being a bivocational, co-vocational leader, and being a part of a church plant. Tell that story and some of the things that the Lord kind of revealed to you, John.
Yeah, I'm a little nuts. The Lord doesn't make it easy. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, I moved to Austin in 2013, connected to a great church planting network through Hill Country Bible Church in Austin. And I felt the call to ministry, but I wasn't sure where that would go. And so went to seminary because that's what you do, I guess. I had a business background briefly, business marketing and management, very entrepreneurial. And as I was working at Hill Country Bible Church, I was going through some church planter training and kind of stumbled across this nonprofit in the inner city that was started back in 1992. And they did everything from the womb to the tomb. They had pregnancy resource center. They had camps, Bible clubs for kids, all in a very segregated part of town. And so anyway, so they brought me in as the interim executive director. I kind of did different roles while I was there for 6 years, and then met a friend, Holland Greggs, good buddy of mine, and said, "Hey, let's go plant a church in East Austin." And so we had families from kind of northwest Austin sell their homes, come and live on the east side of town. We had about 20 families that committed to that. And, man, it was going really well. And then, yeah, so my day job was running this nonprofit with a lean team, and we had over 1,100 volunteers at the time, kind of on a consistent basis. And man, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so we just bootstrapped that thing with a lot of prayer, a lot of great leadership development from the outside in, and always kind of tinkered around in the business community and had some great mentors. That was one thing I needed. I needed some great mentors. And so pastoring and being on a core team and launching an inner city church when everybody said we couldn't do it because, why would you plant a church in a poor neighborhood? Specifically targeting government housing families. That was our heart and still is the heartbeat there. So anyway, so God has a sense of humor, and then blessed that church, blessed us, and yeah, it's kind of full circle. Then came to FCA during the COVID pandemic in 2020. Got fully funded and been doing that ever since. So a lot of cool stories in there.
Well, yeah, an awful lot. And we're going to get to FCA. But I'm curious about how that church started, the inner city church. You say there were about 20 families that went. How were the leaders? This is the leadership podcast. We talk about everything from pastoral formation, down whatever level of serve team member. How does the church go about identifying and training their future campus pastors? Do you know a little bit the ins and outs
absolutely.
of that, John?
Yeah. So this is really interesting because I have the perspective because I was already working at the nonprofit before we planted the church down there. And so from the church planner side, we had the model, basically went through a year-long process, They're training us on, how to build a core team, how to raise the funds, how to identify the neighborhood through prayer and then through some metrics and things. And so the model that we're planning with is very similar, if you're familiar with Rick Warren's church, Saddleback. They really got trained in a lot of their methodology. It's a little different. So most of the church plant model was around more suburban churches, to be honest. It was, hey, try to get that 200 people, plant with a core team of 40 adults, financial viability. So all the metrics that our church planting had really didn't fit what we felt the Lord calling us to do. And they weren't sure it was going to work. So what we did was we went to other church planting networks as well. Acts 29 with Matt Chandler. I went through the Christian Community Development Association, CCDA. I just looked at all sorts of different models, and most of them in the inner city were bivocational models. And so when we met, I was already working at the nonprofit. And so we were praying. I was like, man, I just don't know if I want to be the main guy, especially in that kind of market with young kids. And then I met a friend, Holland Gregg. He was um, praying about planting a church in the inner city, but he was looking at a different community. They were going to come down and do a missions trip to serve with their core team. And then it fell through. So they called us last minute. And on the nonprofit side, our team was looking at, we joked, said it was from the womb to the tomb. So we were really targeting these neighborhoods that were forgotten about, left behind. And the only thing missing was a good community Bible church. A lot of the churches, families drove into church. And so we were dreaming about finding a church partner that could minister to the families with all these sorts of unique issues, right? Because they're government housing. We had over 17 nations represented in our church.
Wow.
Yeah. And because you had Middle Eastern families, because they all get placed there. So long story short, when Holland came and we were talking about it, I said, hey man, let's do this together in our core team. So we had to get some outside training to fit the model that we wanted. But it was really cool. It was a cool church partnership. So the sending church, there's a local church association that we're a part of here. And so there was some money, some grant money that really helped us out. But then the nonprofit said, hey, we have the facilities, you have the church. So we came up with a partnership agreement and saying, hey, if we put a church here, maybe we could grow the church to reach those people. And then the nonprofit had all the programming and said, hey, instead of the church going and create all these programs, that's where we could use the church people to help volunteer and build those relationships. So it was kind of this really beautiful picture. And that's kind of what happened.
Well, I think that's how the church normally grows, is by identifying felt needs, going to a certain market, certain demographic, having a clear focus on who you're trying to reach, and then trying to honestly serve them. This was the way of Jesus, right? Served them bread, healed the sick, cast out, met their felt needs, and then ordered them to the higher felt need, which is a spiritual need, which is a relationship with the living God by faith in his son. So yeah, the felt need ministry, and that can be in any kind. It doesn't have to be necessarily you go to an inner city community. There's brokenness wherever. And I love the fact that partnership is the key word, that you explored. Hey, we don't have to reinvent all this kind of stuff. It already exists. Let's develop the partnership with that huge nonprofit that you were leading. A really, really cool story. Anything more to add about the story, or in terms of what I've said? You just lived out this is why the early church grew, bro. They started meeting felt needs in non-reach people groups and unlikely places, as we spread to the four corners of the earth. I'm walking through a book study on Acts. We're going to be preaching on the book of Acts. You should probably preach through the book of Acts on some sort of a rotation as a church. And you just see how diverse they were in going into all of these respective communities, identifying leaders, meeting felt needs, and then letting them know what their greatest need is. It was a relationship with the Messiah, the promised one, Jesus the Christ. So you're simply doing, it's not simple. It actually takes more work going on mission. It's a lot of work. It's messy, all of that. But you're just emulating how the early church did it, and how I think growing churches today are kind of reframing their understanding of ministry. Long since has the day passed where you put up a church and you're just like, oh, people that are in our denomination or something like that, they're just going to kind of find us. No, man, it's never been about that. It's always been about service. It's always been about the one who came not to be served, but to serve. Anything more to add on to that, John?
Yeah, I was just say, it was very hard. It is hard because you're talking multicultural, multi-generational. You're talking multi-ethnic, even levels of economic status brings so many different challenges, right? Our benevolence ministry could never keep money, right? It's because the whole church is needing. So what we dreamed of in that church, and what was really beautiful is kind of the Act style model of saying, hey, we want to be expositional Bible teachers, and we want to disciple really well. And this discipleship really is life on life discipleship. Programs are great, but even the nonprofit we work for, it was big on holistic care. It goes, hey, the felt need, a lot of ministries, hey, we'll go feed you. Great. But it's like that scripture Jesus said, teach them to fish. And so that was the whole part of, but sometimes we were trying to find ways of, okay, how do we, there's so many people that fall through the cracks. So how do we catch those people that really want to, whether through partnership or whether through a program development? And so anyway, it was a great ministry, still is. It actually still drives a lot of the ministry I do today, even through sport. But I'm still a pastor at heart, and I think the greatest leadership development is through discipleship.
Amen.
It really is.
Couldn't agree more. Well, Jesus agrees and spent 3 years with 12, right? Pouring into 12, and they multiply. It's all about relationship. Greatest
Yeah, and
felt need
John,
is, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, John Maxwell even said, "Hey, I don't know why everyone gets the credit. I just stole everything from Jesus. I took it all from the Bible."
So good. Well, hey, let's talk sports. Tell us the story of leveraging sports for the sake of the gospel. A little bit more of your backstory and what led you to FCA.
Yeah, so I love sport. My dad was a sports anchor on television, first in Arkansas, then in Illinois. That's what brought us to Illinois. So I grew up. My dad got to interview Michael Jordan during during the NBA championships. I'm a big Chicago Bears fan. I got a signed picture on my wall back here of Walter Payton when I was a little kid. He signed it. Big St. Louis Cardinal fan. So anyway, I grew up around sports, coaches, athletes, my whole life of every level. And my dad was on the board for FCA in Central Illinois, and then did all their banquets. So I got to meet Tony Dungy when he was with the Colts, and so some really cool stories. And so I grew up just loving sports, and I was a troubled kid. I like to, I was a little rambunctious, as they might say. So my parents' view of keeping me out of trouble was put me in as many sports as I can. Just keep me busy was their strategy, and it for the most part worked. And I was, a decent athlete, but so I grew up going to FCA football camp every summer, sports camp, since I was a little kid, and what really clicked for me, we had it at my school, and it was pretty strong. My football coach was the sponsor, and it was a great program. But really, what got me was the camps, because that was the first time I think I've seen my peers authentically follow Jesus. I've been to church camps, been to those things, not saying anything wrong with it, but there's something about Billy Graham made a statement we love saying at FCA that a coach will impact more people in 1 year than most will in their entire life. And that's so true, because I think about, man, coach says, when a coach models it out in that world, it just grabs your attention. And so there's something about sports that, whether it's a coach or a famous athlete, we see it a lot right now in common sports. So me growing up around it my whole life was definitely influential. But then I saw genuine, I remember at one of our camps in Indiana, we had a whole bunch of kids from Southside Chicago from the projects, and I mean, scary gang members kind of stuff. Some guys I was really good friends with, and just have this authentic, genuine transformation of life. And then I got to go back home with these guys and then see them just defy the odds, the statistics, and how they lived out their faith in a mighty way. So sports just has that platform. If you like it or not, it just does. And it's cool because a missionary friend of mine was in the bush in India, random, and he's literally in the middle of a mountain somewhere, and he walks up and he sees a kid in a soccer jersey. So that just shows you the influence of sport, that it goes every corner of the earth, and it's pretty bizarre when you think about it. So just the platform alone is huge, and it's impacted me my whole life. So
It's so funny to think about how humans kind of entertain themselves, and like where did these games come from? I think the origin of some sports are kind of funny. I was just getting into a pretty in-depth conversation with one of our worship leaders, Matt Preston, that has very strong opinions about very random things as it relates to sports. But he was referring to like who came up with a rule in baseball that if you came out of the game, you couldn't go back in because game went 18 innings and they ran out of
Yeah.
pitchers and stuff like that. Like who came up with these random rules? And then we all just kind of orient ourselves around them and don't really honestly question it that much. Just the way it's always been. And but we love seeing spectacular things that humans can do. We're just in awe. I think sports in a first article reality. So God as creator. We're just I'm amazed. I coach high school football.
Yeah.
And we got one young man named Kamari. And Kamari can make people miss in ways that are just unbelievable. It's extra. I mean, he did this kid was coming to make a tackle and he like did this jump back thing where it looked like he jumped like 4 feet in the air to like, move his body back and rotate it all different types of ways. He's a little guy, but it's just extraordinary. And as I watch Kamari do his thing or to get to the line, the linemen just like, lock up and hold it. As I watch them do their thing, I'm like, God, that you created people to move like this and to work together like this. It's extraordinary. So you said something that was fascinating about coach's impact. What is that all about? That a coach has that kind of impact on a person's, that what they say carries more, you could say, longevity, and just the character. I got some thoughts. I mean, I think competition kind of brings it out of you, and you get to see modeled how people respond to adversity, how leaders respond to adversity. And bad coaches can leave a mark on you too, who wound you, who shame you. But man, to see a leader, a coach, head coach, whatever, respond when things are down and draw people up like that, we see the character of Christ come alive in those coaches. So is that a little bit about why a coach is maybe that much more impactful, because of the competitive environment that they're in and the good and the bad and the ugly that can be seen in that environment? John, say more there.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, honestly. I think it's kind of that same. I think, like, even in the military, you have those guys that kind of trauma bond. We kind of joke about that, go to combat, but you build that brotherhood that they get. I think it's the same concept with a coach, is maybe not to that extreme, but like, it's funny. So I'm a sports dad, I'm a sports guy. My 9-year-old coaches baseball team, and I'm teaching him, his swing, his batting stance, everything. And to me, I'm dad, right? And I work with all these, even some pro athletes now, and I'm around the best of the best. But if my friend's dad or his friend's dad says it, who has no sports background really, teaches him, he's like, yes, coach. There's just something about coach, right? A parent can tell you a million times to do something, but something about that whistle around the neck, coach says, do this. And it's funny because, like, I've been playing T-ball since I was, I don't know, 4. And I think I remember just about every coach I've ever had in sports, which is just bizarre to me. I'm like, these are like my buddy's dads. Like, one guy was a construction worker. So I think there's something about the competitive nature that brings it out. But I think there's something, it's like when you have your attention, when you truly want something, and you're interested in it, and then the person who has the keys to that playing time, or to that father figure or whatever it is, you're locked in. And I think that's a big part of it, right? It doesn't mean like my dad taught me so much about sports and in character, but I remember when my coach, told me about it. And then it's like, think about it, like my coach will make me do push-ups or make me run, and I'll say, yes, coach, and I'll go do it. Whereas, like, I can't tell you how many times I told my son, hey, go run laps. Like, let's work out. No, dad. So there is something about that. And then working. So I don't know exactly what it is with the science maybe behind it, but I do know that there's an influence. It's kind of like, even if a small group leader says something profound theologically, but then a pastor says it from the pulpit, you're like, oh, that's so good. It's like, I think it's kind of that same concept, right?
I think we're starving for authority figures that we can trust, that kind of keep us safe, that give our lives order, who are wiser, who are beyond us, who have been there and done it and been strengthened by it. Yeah, our head coach for our football team is John Carlson played 8 years in the NFL, and so they know like this guy was in it. He had he had to block some dudes, coming off the edge, and so when he says to kind of lock up, it's just it's different, and the young men respond. It is kind of like discipleship, isn't it? And it and we because we're Christians, it's a Christian school, like so we connect all the dots back to discipleship, back to the way of Jesus. So what are the top 3 things that sports does to shape young Christians to look more like Jesus? Let's talk about that, John.
Yeah, I think the first one is that community aspect, kind of what we talked about. Like, there's something about being in a group that holds you to a higher standard. And I think disciples, Jesus did it right with the 12. He did it with the groups. He had them go out and do it, right? There's some leadership principles, but really there's something about this standard of accountability and rhythms that we have, with athletes. They're so disciplined on their eating habits, their sleep schedules, their workout routines. I mean, it's almost like that spiritual formation, that discipleship, that there's this order to life. And I think that's one of the reasons why, like the same thing with military and first responders, why there's this natural desire. And I think that's good. I think God gave us this order, this pattern. And obviously, man, we like to take it to the other extreme. But I think that's one avenue that sports creates rhythms where it builds in those disciplines. So that community aspect. Um, and obviously, community is contextual, right? Because, my definition of community might be a little different, but we know that we need other people holding us accountable and doing life with us. The second one I would say is just overall character, right? The fruit of the spirit. Some of it is gifted, but a lot of it is shaped and formed in us over time.
That's it.
And there's times in our life where, one might be more evident than the other. And I think that's one thing that sports naturally does well is like you said, we can connect these kind of life principles, spiritual principles to, like perseverance or integrity or all these things that kind of sports naturally opens the door for those conversations. And they listen because the coach is saying it or the volunteer is saying it or a player is saying it. And then I think the third one, at least there's probably plenty more, but I think it's the platform, the influence, right? You can influence for good or for bad, right? Just like a lot of other people a lot of times we equate leadership with position. And I love John Maxwell says that, no, leadership, positional leadership is the lowest level of leadership, that it's actually influence. And I think that's what it is. Sports provides a huge platform, even on a local school campus, right? Because like if the athletes do something on campus, it ripple effects, good or bad. And so I think in discipleship, it's we have a platform for evangelism. We have a platform for how to invite other peoples into our lives, whether that's at work or at church or at home. And so I really think that sports does a good job of highlighting that platform, and it trains us on how to be careful of how we, what we say and how we say it with others.
Yeah.
At least at its
No,
best, right?
I love that. I've worked on a lot of different teams, and this is a high level statement, but it's interesting. I've observed a pattern of receiving feedback. People that were in sports, because it's not about perfection, it's about progress, embracing the pain of the journey, and it's not about the destination, it's about right here and right now, and growing. There's always more to receive. It seems like people who played sports may be better at receiving constructive criticism, critique, with a yes coach. I've been working on them getting better. Hopefully, if they had good coaches, not receiving critique in the workplace from a posture of shame. I'm the worst, so kind of self-talk. No, I'm a work in progress. So I can, not that everybody has to be an athlete, but I can tell those that have been coached in the past in how they receive constructive critique and criticism. Any thoughts on that, John? Have you noticed that sports kind of builds that criticism muscle?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've had the pleasure now doing even FCA the last 5 years of working with kids, and some of them are now in the NFL or in pro sports. A lot of them go and play, in the next level. And it's true. One of the things I always teach them is saying, "Hey, talent will get you to the next level, but your character will keep you there." And it's so true because there's a guy named Dr. Jeffrey Dukes. He wrote a book called Three Dimensional Leadership, Three Dimensional Coaching, and basically he did a PhD work on this very thing. And it's I went through his certification process. It was great. And basically, he said, okay, what makes the top 1% of athletes and coaches in the world? What sets them apart? So it says the first dimension, and again, I'm doing this off memory, but the first dimension is talent, right? You still got to be good at the game. The second dimension is the psychology. Do you understand all the pieces? But he said what set the best of the best, right? The Tom Landrys, the Michael Jordans, like what set that 1%? And he calls it heart. It's that they gave that X factor. They were able to tap into that. And I think a lot of that comes around the coachability or the humility of the feedback. Because when they get to the next level, you may have been a stud in high school, but you get to college, there's 3 or 4 guys that are just as good as you on the team. So then they look for leadership. They look for that coachability. Am I able to take that feedback and then do something with it? I think a lot of people take feedback, but they never implement it and do something with it. And that's really what I see that to be true. A lot of kids that I've seen excel at the next level, it's not because they were more talented than some of the others, maybe a few one-offs, but really it's because they were able to take that feedback, apply it, and get better and have that little extra push than maybe someone in front of them.
Yeah, that's so good. Heart is key. And heart, when I hear heart, and I'd have to read the book to know more. I hear like an extra emphasis on people skills, on coachability, humility, the fruit of the spirit being seen in a person's life. Yeah, that's so good. And man, I can think of coaches in the past where I would I would do whatever for that guy. Because I knew they wanted what was best for me, right?
Mhm.
And that sounds selfish, but they were
No, but
selfless,
but
and
that's
they
that's
kind of
the
modeled.
concept.
They kind of modeled. Yep. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
And that's how discipleship is too. I mean, if you it's about serving the other, and when you help them win, see, there's a fine line between manipulation and leadership. The difference is their benefit versus my benefit, right?
That's it.
I could be a great speaker, and I could try to manipulate you to do what I want you to do, but that's using them for my gain. But it's also kind of that what Jesus model, right? Flip it on the head. If I go and I serve, well, it's going to turn around and benefit me because I'm helping them win anyway. And so I think it's that same mindset of just leadership. The world, that's why Jesus said, don't lord it over them like the Gentiles do. He's saying, hey, that's positional leadership. We think if we can get to this position, then I'll have authority. But really, true leadership is about serving and elevating people, right?
That's it. Hey, well, we're kind of talking on some Maxwell principles right now. Tell the story of how you met John, and then we're going to get into 2 or 3 Maxwell leadership principles that probably should be dusted off, and they may get overlooked. Some of his laws. Let's go there, John. Take us to school, man.
Yeah. So I've been following John most of my life. My grandfather was an insurance salesman, and I remember listening to his cassette tapes that just dated myself maybe a little bit. But, and then, when John was still a pastor, even, and then always liked his stuff. It was just a lot of business people love his stuff too, because he just makes it, he says he puts the cookies on the lower shelf. So he takes these, my degrees in leadership. And so I studied leadership theory and all those things. But John does a really good job of repackaging it and making it like really, really practical. So I've been reading his books and doing his stuff for a while. And I have a certification through another executive coaching company, but um, his program I'd kind of been eyeballing since he started his coaching company. And then in August of 24, I had the opportunity. I joined his leadership team actually in December of 23, and then went to his conference in Orlando. And I actually had a deal where I got to spend a few days with John and his executive team. There was a small group of us. Got to have some private lunches with them and kind of talk through leadership stuff. And it's always one of those things, like when you meet somebody who's really famous, you're like, okay, are they like their perception? And John's just a funny guy. Like we got in, and he's like that grandpa, a lot of people nicknamed him Papa John. I refuse to call him that. But we got in the room, and he's just funny, and he's down to earth. His whole team is great. Mark Cole, Chris, all those guys, man. I just loved meeting his team. And yeah, it was just great because, I got to ask him questions, John, if, why did you leave the church? The church is the best place to make leaders. And he said, well, I started writing books and none of the pastors were buying my stuff. It was all business leaders. That's the only reason he went to the marketplace. And then pastors started buying his books when he was in the marketplace. And so, but I didn't know this, but it was really cool. When I was down in Orlando at his conference, they have led over 1 million people to Christ worldwide this past year. They just out of his years of business, they've led over 1 million people to Christ through this business. And I was like, man, that is so cool. One, that he's tracking that and then following up with them, but it's just the way that his company is run. So yeah, it's a great community. I finally ponied up the cash and went through the program, and now I'm licensed to teach a lot of his different materials. He's written over like 90 books.
Right.
So when he's talking about leadership principles, I'm like, which ones? But he's got like 10 New York best. I don't even know what it is, but yeah, it's just great. And his whole community, he's got over 50,000 certified coaches now, through his program. And so I'm in kind of this family of coaches and trainers. And so we do work together, we share ideas, and a lot of them are believers. And so it's been really cool to connect with that community. But yeah,
Mm.
John's great. I wish I could spend more time with him. He jumps on calls every now and then. I get to do some mentorship stuff through his team. So yeah, just a great program.
Isn't he an awesome model and example? I want to be, and I'm not going to write 90 books or anything like that. I got the first, I wrote a book, and first one's coming out, and mad props to guys that like mass write. That's a lot of work. And
Yeah.
I know it's just day by day and setting good rhythms to, write a writing window, where you're promising to get out a certain amount of words. I got another buddy, Zach Zender, who's written a number of books. And so yeah, that's wild. But two, the fact that he's been doing it for so long, and I don't know how old John Maxwell is. He's got to be in his 80s or something like that.
He's
Is late
I think he's
70s? I don't know.
79 or
Yeah,
78. At a
yeah.
birthday. Yeah. And he
But
doesn't
like he's not retiring. There's no
no.
stop with that guy. There and no retirement in the Bible, right? Maximum energy. It's so cool, isn't it?
Well, and his big thing too now, he travels the world. His big thing, they have an I-Lead curriculum. Now they're teaching values-based coaching in all these countries that a lot of them are Muslim-based countries. And he's meeting presidents, and it's just the stories are so inspiring, so cool. He's got a whole youth program, and they're teaching these value-based career, which is really biblical style curriculum. And he's teaching in countries where it's illegal to be a Christian even. And he doesn't hide it. And in fact, he's meeting with their president. So he's been able to, yeah, a cool story. I love hearing those stories.
So let's get into some of your favorite law of the whatever it is. Let's get into
Yeah.
some of those to dust them off. And we're also going to start talking about how some of these principles can apply to leading in the local church. So
Yeah,
excited about that, John. Let's go.
absolutely. The laws that I'll quote from are from his most famous book, probably the 21 Infutable Laws of Leadership. It's kind of the DNA of his whole program. And so one of the ones that I'll start with the ones that kind of get overlooked. So the first one I call the law of the lid. So it's chapter 1 of that book. It's great. It says that leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. The higher your leadership lid, the greater your potential impact. And this is so true. And so really this is more personal growth. This starts with like every leader is the lid to their organization or the lid to their potential. I know a lot of really smart people, but they just kind of they stop or they self-sabotage and they can never grow. So in the local church, I see this a lot. It's almost like if we just have better theology and programs, we'll grow. When really I was talking to one of my seminary professors, and he said, probably 9 out of 10 pastors don't get fired because of a moral failure. It's because of bad leadership. Which is true because most seminaries don't train us. When I went to my first seminary, they didn't really train us on how to lead boards or recruit volunteers or lead staff. It was harmatology, it was ecclesiology, it was those kind of things, which is great. We need it. But so the law of the lid is one. Like, how do I raise my lid, and what does that look like? Create a personal growth plan, spiritual growth, and leadership growth. Right. Um, the second one was he calls it the law of priorities, and it's leaders understand that activity is not necessarily accomplishment. I'll sum that up with focus. And this is where I failed poorly as a pastor. Church planner, right? There's all these needs. We want to reach the community. We're hungry to grow, and we have great partnerships and everything. And we're a church at that point. We had maybe 70 people, and a lot of them had young families, and we're like, do it all. Right, let's be at the Bible clubs. Let's do this because we want to grow. We want to meet all these needs. we were moving so fast that our back door was probably as open as our front door. We were getting new people. The main reason why people were leaving it was, oh, we want more community, want more community. Okay, but what does that mean? Is that because we had small groups, we did the models and all that, and so it wasn't contextualized. So a lot of it was we were too spread thin, and we were putting programs over people. And as a pastor, that kills me because I'm the leadership guy, right? It's like, no, 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 no. Develop people that, and then programs are a tool to serve people. But in the church world, it's so easy because Sunday's always coming and there's so many needs. And everybody in my congregation thinks that we should be doing something different, doing their thing. And so it's really of focusing on resources. Hey, we love that thing, but what's your church uniquely gifted in to focus in, maybe even just this season? It doesn't have to be forever. And then stick to that. That's a big one that I failed miserably in, and I learned the hard way, and I continue to get better in that. And then the third one I put was the law of legacy. You got to know where you're going in order to get there. And what I mean is, it says a leader's lasting value is measured by succession. Your true success is determined by what you leave behind. I don't remember the statistics. Barna Research had some data out on this, but the number of churches that die after the senior pastor, the founding pastor, leaves or retires, it's just astounding. It's sad. Because a lot of times when we get into ministry, we're always thinking about Sunday or next quarter, next year, and then we don't think about raising up leaders until it's too late. And so that's really where we fall into is what's the legacy? What a big question I always asked our team was, hey, if our church closed tomorrow, what would the neighborhood even notice? And so we really want to focus on what's our legacy going to be. And it's going to be, for us, it was discipleship and being a community-driven church. How are we going to bless the community? And then some principles that I think John teaches. I think all of the leadership is leadership. So I think all these leadership applies to the local church. It may look a little different how you execute them. One of them I call is the law of magnetism. Who you are is who you attract. Your team reflects your character, energy, and values. Now, Tim, I don't know about you. You've been a pastor. I may ask you this. We talk about our church culture. And there's multiple cultures in a church, right? You have your staff culture, your board culture, you have your congregational culture, and then maybe even the culture which you're impacting outside. And it's true, there's a little bit of a leadership bias. Usually we attract who we are. So when you're in a multi-ethnic community, very diverse, you're going to get in some arguments about that. And so really it's how do we lead from a place of character? And it's okay if people disagree. It's saying, hey, let's keep the main thing, but this comes back to focus. God's led us to this chapter now. We're going to probably attract those kind of people.
Yeah. That's interesting. Hey, let's pause there just for a second. This is good. The law of the lid says to me, I have to keep growing, and I am the bottleneck, and I have to raise the ceiling through personal growth, spiritual discipline. All of this is covered with grace. Our identity in Christ. This isn't a heaviness. This is a light thing. But man, there's beauty and wonder in the world. So it's an awesome thing for me to continue to explore how God made me and didn't make me, and try to raise the ceiling for myself and for others. And then a lot of priorities, focus. I mean, a lot of churches are really, really scattered. Just like you said, trying to do so many things. In the ULC, we teach the church engagement model, which came to us from an organization called Glue. And I don't know if you've heard about that: attract, get, retain, disciple, multiply, or some kind of words. And you're at any given season, you're probably not going to be hitting on all cylinders in all 5 of those jobs of the local church. And so focus requires getting this up to snuff, getting for us our attract. We had a heavy season on attract, driving people to our website engagement. We're all in on that. And so that system kind of gets created, and then we're able to start, okay, what we had to right now. And we're a mission oriented church, man. There's so many things going on in our congregation that are mission, that sometimes the focus even on Sunday, because some churches really struggle to make Sunday like it was like an idol to them. It's not an idol to us, but we're like, to meet more people, all the first time guests that are coming, we have to focus on, let's make Sunday great again. So all of the hospitality that goes into making Sunday great. So that's like our focus right now. But this is hard for me because I think a lot of leaders love shiny objects. Do this. Why can't we just do it all? And I have executive directors and other folks that are way, wiser, that say, no, we're just going to hone in on this. And I have to be, even though I'm the senior pastor, I have to be led. I
Yeah.
come underneath them. I submit to them for the sake of focus. And then, what is we think about legacy a fair amount. That's all about leadership development. That's all about who's on your bench, who's up and coming. What's this place? I think about this. I'm 44, been here 12 years in my congregation. And so in the Lord's congregation, it's not mine. Is it going to be better? I get hit by a bus or I get cancer, or I die. I know I'm going to die. Is it going to be better, healthier, stronger? Is it going to multiply as I decrease, and that's inevitably coming. I don't think a lot of times we spend enough time talking about our departure. I think we need to spend more time saying, hey, there's going to come a day when I'm not here. And how have I given away authority and responsibility, that it's all of ours together? And then your law of magnetism, that's the culture definitely becomes shaped after the senior leaders. And I've had a hard time. Let's hang here for a second. I've had a hard time with that. And then I read verses like the Apostle Paul, like, as I follow Christ, so follow me. And so, like, anything that smacks of pride and positional influence is like vomit in my mouth, but there's still, I'm kind of just understanding the role of being a spiritual father in this season. Not a crazy uncle, not a brother. And I think it's just right. They called me to be the senior pastor at 32, and I definitely was not like a spiritual father. But
Oh, that's good.
now I got kids. I got kids that are, moving out of the house, and a staff that could be my kids just about,
Yeah.
So putting on a different hat in that season, and just kind of becoming more comfortable in my skin. Thanks for the therapy session there, John. You're a great coach.
You're welcome. Tell
Yeah,
me
dude.
more. No, I was kidding.
Yeah, tell me more.
Keep going.
No,
And then
yeah. No, that's enough. So I just wanted to like put those laws into my framework, and maybe hopefully other leaders are listening. They definitely come alive. You have a couple other laws though that you think should be more highlighted in the local church. Let's talk about those, John.
yeah. So I talked a little about the law of magnetism. I think you are who you attract. And I think for pastors, this is especially hard because I was joking. I was coaching a pastor the other day, and he was struggling with this. And he said, I understand why are so many pastors becoming narcissists? Well, we literally put you on a pulpit, on a platform every week. Spotlight, right? And so it's really easy. And this is true even in companies. When I was working with a very seasoned CEO, and I said, hey, your voice carries more, your presence carries weight. You walk into a room, so you got to be very careful of how you even with the best intention, like your staff, your team, whatever, it carries a heavier weight just because you're a title. And so the higher up you goes, the harder you got to work at this, and especially to get the truth. I was talking to a pastor of a very large church, almost 10,000, and he said, "Yeah, I have to work really hard to find people that are going to tell me no and tell me the truth." Because again, the higher up you go in leadership, the more insulated it becomes, even if it's not on purpose. So you have to fight for that, and you really have to live that out. And honestly, that's where a lot of church splits usually end up happening, is because leadership becomes so isolated. I'm talking about over real issues, not like the color of carpet is this or whatever, but it's really because what happens is the leader gets so isolated and so insulated that you can't get honest feedback because you got your yes crew telling you what it is. So that magnetism is very important. And that's, it goes back to the law of the lid, right? You really got to continue to grow, especially as pastors. It's like, man, I am not perfect, and I need to be growing closer to the Lord every single day. I think most pastors want that. But specifically, that becomes a challenge. So that's something we got to continue to fight for. The second thing is the law of connection. Now, this should come naturally for pastors, in my opinion. And that sum that up is leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. Connection precedes commitment. And this is all based in the presence of trust. So usually I go back. I told my team when I hired my staff, I said, "Hey, I hired you because I trust you. Here, I stole this from Craig Rochelle, that trust is given, mistrust is earned." And I stole it because I said, "Hey, I hired you enough because I trust you until you give me reason not to." Where the world's the opposite. You got to earn my trust. You got to show me. No, no, no. I already hired you. I got you in the door. So I do that. So the law of connection is a lot of times, whether it's a building campaign or trying to get you to sign up for kids ministry or whatever, a lot of times we're just trying to get butts in seats until you touch a heart. Even in giving, yes, we know there's tithing and gives, and we need to do it because it's a spiritual discipline. But I was sitting in a church and I said, "Hey, did you know that your tithes?" This is what an impact story from our benevolence ministry, and they did that, and then they asked for the tithe. I'm like, that is so cool, because I'm sitting in a congregation, like I do it out of discipline, but it's cool to know, like, oh, am I buying that light up there? Well, cool, we need lights, but it's just really interesting to see how they touch the heart and say, "Hey, this is your part of the kingdom of God, and this is how you partner with us." And then the last one's the law of explosive growth. To add growth, you lead followers, but to multiply growth, you lead leaders. Reproducing leaders creates exponential impact. Again, I think this is one of the points that we all would agree on that statement. I think the hard part is the execution of that. And the reason why is either we don't have systems and processes that promote that, because we're usually too scattered, right? Program over people. And I think the other challenge, at least I'd love to hear your perspective, Tim, but I think the other challenge of this really is because we lead how we were led oftentimes. And usually we lead to go get something done instead of on who to become. And this is why I love the sports contact, because sports, again, it trains you on a kind of holistic player, not just go catch the ball, right? I love that platform. So anyway, I feel free to push back. Those are just some of there's probably plenty of more, but those are some that I've experienced myself as a leader in the church. And then also I get the chance to work with a lot of different pastors and nonprofit leaders. And this is one that I think a lot of us struggle with in general.
Hey, good. Let's go a little deeper. On the law of magnetism and receiving feedback. What are some of the healthy ways, that you have seen pastors or business leaders set up a system of regular feedback? For us, we have surveys. We we have a ministry called. We're going to be an early adopter of a platform that a friend of mine. He's a kingdom entrepreneur. Started a ministry called Pulse, to secure feedback for Christian schools from parents to help them get 1% better. And now he's got church. I'm gonna say Ryan's gonna get mad at me. Church Pulse or something. It's not Pulse, but it's the same type of a feature for churches. Now my thought process is that the parent pulse for schools is going to be stronger than church pulse, because I don't think that a lot of pastors and church leaders really want to know all of the things from their congregation. I think ignorance is bliss sometimes, and let's just go along to get along, and let's live passive and probably passive aggressively with one another. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all goes. So right now we do net promoter survey, and we have to give data to our board that shows that we're caring for members. It's on discipleship and multiplication and care of staff and all of that. Like, it comes out on our surveys, and we have to do something about it. So yeah, any thoughts on how leaders can become less insular, how we get good feedback, and then how that can lead to getting 1% better all the time?
Absolutely. So obviously there's a ton of great surveys out there. 360 surveys is the best. Smaller churches, right? If you're talking about, well, we have a church of 50 or we have a church of a couple hundred, that might be a little harder because some people get nervous about putting their name on stuff. I like having putting their name on it. I said, hey, let's build the culture, right? But you got to understand the culture first. But yeah, I think there's a ton of surveys in the business world. That a lot of times we use customer satisfaction surveys for that same thing, congregational care. So I think you guys already hit the curve as talk about the law of averages. I think more specifically, what we can do too is have an inner circle and an outer circle. And just like discipleship, right? Who are those 2 to 4 guys or whoever that I'm going to call for life stuff? Do I have that as a leadership too? Do I have a leadership inner circle? A lot of times, I'm in a pastor's group. There's like 30 of us in this group, and just different denominations. We come together just to love Jesus and get to know each other and just do life. But I have a couple of those guys that I know different seasons of ministry experience and life, and I could call them day or night and say, "Hey, man, if I need feedback, hey." So what I like to say is, if someone tells me a hard thing, even if I don't agree with it, there's probably a kernel of truth in it. And so that's the humility factor. Is like, even I'm like, so the first thing I'll do is I'll call these guys and say, "Hey, someone said this to me. Um, do you see any evidence of that? Be honest." And that's my inner circle. um, my outer circle are like my staff or some of my key leaders in the church, and those are my people that are giving me feedback. And when I say feedback, I think there's two types of feedback, right? There's programmatic feedback, like the Sunday experience was the sermon. What could I have changed? Is that feedback, and it's important. But I'm talking about character feedback, like my leadership survey of, hey man, do you feel cared for? Do you feel like you have a clear vision? What do you know what a pathway forward? What does growth look like for you? And that's where I think a lot of churches struggle, is because they either go too corporate and we're going to do EOS methods and we're going to do these meeting styles, or we're going to go the other and we say, hey, just grow spiritually. And so that's a long answer, but I think there's a lot of great
Good.
tools out there that you can look, see what's best for your context, and then really just make it part of your rhythm. So like at FCA, we do a thing. We do kind of a 360 feedback. We do it 4 times a year. We have annual reviews with my FCA staff and myself included. We have a spiritual goal, a personal goal, and then we have kind of ministry goals. And I let my staff hold my feet. They get to see my goals too. And I do that. They don't necessarily get to speak into all of my things, but they definitely get to hold me accountable. My peers get to hold me accountable, and then my boss. So I have a 360 review even at FCA, um, because I value feedback, and it builds our part of our culture. Say, hey, this is, and then what we do is we build in our core values into that survey. And so, like, one of our core values is teammate, self at FCA in Texas. And so, one of the ways I have to give an example of how I live that out, or how my teammate, or a goal in that. So, the more you can incorporate to your mission, your core values, your behaviors, then it helps put legs to the mission. Because then it's like, your core values are how you behave to get to the mission, to drive the mission. So I like to connect it back to that. So surveys, personal feedback, and then honestly, when someone gives you live feedback, don't rebuttal. Thank you for sharing. Someone did that to me recently, gave me a review. I thought he was 100% wrong, maybe 99% wrong. And I said, thank you for sharing that with me. Now, we may have a follow-up conversation later, but that time he felt the truth, the honesty to share something with me. And I said, okay, I have to practice what I preach. Thank you for sharing with me. I value your feedback.
So
So.
you didn't rebuttal in that conversation at all? You just like took it? You didn't try to justify yourself or like make a excuse or whatever?
No, because I value the relationship
So
over,
good.
and he did it in a great way. Like, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. Now, if he was coming and call me a jerk and all sorts of names, different story, right? Like, hey, no. But when I have a teammate, even a direct report that's coming to me and giving me feedback, the relationship trust is more important than the feedback. And so now my job as the leader is, okay, what am I going to do with that feedback? So one, I'm going to take it back to my inner circle because they know me deeper. But then me and this person have a relationship. So I'm going to go get clarity on that later and say, hey, thank you for sharing that. I have some follow up. I want to get better as a leader. Can you tell me more? Or, hey, can you tell me, I really want to improve. And so what it does, it creates that safety in the conversation to where, hey, we really want to get better, for the glory of God and for our mission.
How are you trying to become a better listener to your team? Because I think a lot of this it requires humility, but then it also requires us humility and shutting my mouth are kind of synonymous.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And just be I don't have all the answers, and so thank you for the feedback. This is your perspective. And for me, gosh, my whole life, it seems like, is feedback, review,
Right.
refinement, right? Because
Yeah.
you're never done. Ministry is the infinite game, and people are remarkably messy, and chief of sinners here. And so we shouldn't be like remarkably shocked. You said something that I think people just kind of walked right by. He didn't say I was a jerk. So if they come and like are like character assassination, like that person's probably not on my my team,
Right.
because yeah, it's not just like they're all friends and they're not all yes men or women at all, but we know each other and there's a depth of relationship, and we're not gonna harm one another. But if we're talking like strategy, there's a potential that I and our team missed something always. And so, and even if we feel like we were justified or right or we're on the right track, other people, this is change management, other people haven't been in the room as we're thinking about changing service times, John. Oh,
Ooh.
and we've got some rationale why, but like we've been talking about it for like 5, 6 months, and we're just now starting to enter it out into public conversation. And so, yeah, we're getting all sorts of feedback, as you would imagine, around that. Do this, don't do that, and have you thought about this, and all of that. And so, I think church leaders, because we live in such a the gap. This is why leading in the church, and this is no offense to those who are in corporate America, your job is very, very hard, but you can fire people
Yeah.
that are on your team. It's a pay to play. But here we're a soft target for all types of people. EGRs, extra grace required, people with a variety of different perspectives, mental health perspectives, and things. Like, the church is remarkably beautiful, remarkably eclectic, and the journey of discipleship is growing from consumer, and there's a lot of consumer Christians, to contributor, partner, coming
Yeah.
alongside me. And that gap between consumer to contributor, and we want to serve all people. This is the tension between like a mission and a programmatic church, and we're like living this like all the time. We exist for mission, our heart is for mission, we want to raise up leaders. I just got out of a meeting literally talking about this, releasing people for mission, etc. And at the same time, people are coming on Sundays, and if the guitar player doesn't, it can be distracting, or if one of the C team preachers is preaching, I don't feel as filled up today. Like, this is some of the real time feedback we get, and it's so all that to say, if you're leading in the local church, thank you, and keep learning. You're in holy work, John.
Yeah.
John. So let's close with this. We're about at time. This has been fun. The time has flown. What stories in the Bible display aspects of coaching? Is Jesus a coach? And what do you see in the Apostle Paul too as a coach? And I know you're going to clarify terms here between coaching and mentoring. A lot of those terms need to get defined. Let's close with talking about Jesus and coaching.
Yeah. I brought this up because this is very common, right? So a mentor, I like to say, is someone who's giving their best of you, and we need those people, right? That's that spiritual fight. Let me implore wisdom on you. A counselor does a good job of helping you understand patterns, maybe blind spots in your life, right? And that's more counseling. And then coaching is a forward focus. And what I'm saying is that's pulling the best out of. And so Jesus is very, famous rabbinic style teaching. It's very popular in Greek culture too, Socratic questioning. And it's basically what coaching is. It's let me get better. And you asked this question earlier, like, how do I get better at this? This is really the secret sauce is the level of your questions are going to dictate the level of growth. And what I mean by that is, so what I'm trying to get better at personally, and what Jesus did so well was, man, he would have a dope sermon, and then he would just stop mid sermon and then walk over there, and then let people come to him to get clarity on the next part. I'm like, can you imagine if you preached a sermon, you got about point two, and then you just stopped and then went to the back of the church and then like let people come to you. So Jesus did this. I mean, obviously he's the Son of God, just incredible. Obviously with the story, but Jesus was a coach because he asked, I forgot how many questions he asked in the Bible, but it was like 3 times more, or 300%. It was ridiculous, more than lessons he taught recorded in scripture. And so Jesus led with questions. And I think that's what a great coach does is, hey, I may know the truth. And as teachers, that's hard because I'm a teaching pastor, right? My heart is to teach you God's word and the truth. Like, what is God revealing? What does he say? How to hermeneutics, all that stuff. But that's what Jesus was, that life on life, and was like, hey, what do you think? Who do they say that I am? Right. And he's helping them get to that point. So that's what a great coach does. And Paul did this great too, right? Um, and just his training method. And so I think part of it is just that life on life. And then the other part is asking really good questions.
Have you ever found it kind of fascinating in the Gospels that in the Sermon on the Mount it's like you can read it in like 4 minutes, 5 minutes. It's not even that long. And then you're exactly right. The rest of the recorded interactions are life on life. And I think that's maybe a point of hope for pastors. Your greatest impact, yes, Sunday, the word doing its work is really, really necessary. But discipleship, life on life, raising up other leaders, exploring, like seeing them come alive and sharing the gospel, like that's more impactful, not just in your life and your ministry in your church, but for the advancement of the gospel. You care more about the small than you do about the large. I find more joy, John, in this season of life, in seeing other people do and experience and try and fail and improve. I find more joy in coaching others than I do in giving a sermon or whatnot. And it hurts. It really kind of hurts my heart when and people are well intentioned when they say, they ask, "Are you preaching this week?" Because we've got like a preaching team and stuff,
Yeah.
and like, who cares? Like, you come, the word's gonna be here.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus is gonna show up. It's gonna be awesome, regardless of who brings the word. Right? It's not about the person. It's about the Holy Spirit connecting the word to our lives. And think about how Jesus was like the greatest leader ever, and that he spends 3 years, doesn't give but one like huge recorded sermon. He does other teaching, but we don't have it documented necessarily. The longest section of Jesus talking is in John 13. He's like living the sermon out and the washing of feet, and then giving the model of love, how the church is you're gonna receive the Holy Spirit. I love, and then the high priestly prayer. He's like modeling for them what a prayer life looks like. And John gives us that kind of snapshot behind the scenes into Jesus' life the night before he was betrayed and gave himself his very body and blood for the forgiveness of sins. But other than that, he goes and he dies. We have his recorded words. He obviously was raised, spent 40 days, and then he bounces, man. And Pentecost comes and the world is forever changed by the Spirit. Like, that's what I like, the simple model of the way of Jesus in discipleship, meaning I'm going to pour into you, and then there's going to come a time when I'm going to go. Don't worry, you're going to have the Holy Spirit. And this is the Apostle Paul, as you've seen me lead, love, care, sacrifice, serve, so you're going to do the same thing. And we're the recipients of that radical display of Jesus coaching.
Amen. And this is
Jesus
where
is the
the
greatest
church should
coach.
really lead the way, right? We should be
Yeah, man.
producing the best leaders because we
Come
got the
on.
best model. We got
Exactly.
we got the Holy Spirit, and we got Christ himself and God's word. We should be in producing leaders in the marketplace. I mean, we should do it with excellence. And so that's my heart. I mean, that's why I do coaching and training, is because really it all boils down to creating godly leaders that are impact the world for good. I mean, that's
So
really
good.
what.
Amen. If people want to connect with you, John, how can they do so? Drop a couple websites here they can follow you.
Yeah, active on social media, John Rector. And then if you want FCA website, fcaaustin.org. And my information's on there if you want to connect that way, or on my business page, rectorleadership.com. That's all things leadership. And I do a lot of training for organizations and churches and nonprofits for a lot of stuff like this. They'll let me be the bad guy. I'll come in, mix up your culture and tell you you're not doing it right. No, I'm just kidding. And I come in and do some help. So, yeah.
That's so good. I got a comment and then a question
Yeah, go
to
ahead.
close. I'm going to guess you played football, high school football? Yeah.
State champions, baby.
Okay. Well, you were, and we've never met face to face. So let me see. Were you a guard or a linebacker? Were you on the line? What did you play? Were you running
Linebacker
back?
and a linebacker in middle school, and then coach put me on the D line. I was a nose guard
You're
for
a
the
nose
most
guard.
part, and I played
Yeah.
O line a little bit, but played a little bit college. Yeah, nose guard was
You
we
were,
were in a 4-3 defense. So I was an inside tackle.
dude, that's hardcore in the trenches. And two, one of my favorite artists is Ben Rector. I love me some Ben. You're not related to Ben Rector, are you?
As far as I know, we may be distant cousins based on something, but I don't think so. If so far removed. If he came to a family reunion, I don't know. Not that I know of. Great musician though.
What did your dad? Who did your dad cover in sports? You said
Yeah.
some of the famous, but like, were there some teams that he covered?
Yeah, so start off with Arkansas Razorbacks. Fort Smith was his first deal, and then was covered the University of Illinois a lot. in Central Illinois. But yeah, he covered, the Bulls in the 90s, the 85 Bear, or not 85 Bears. He was after that, but um, he covered a lot of college sports, some pro teams, but we're huge St. Louis Cardinal fans. We'd go to several games a year. So we got to meet some of the big wigs. And so, yeah, he covered kind of anything central to Northern Illinois, Chicagoland.
Was he
We did
play
a
by
lot of-
play? Color
he
play
did
by
that
play?
color commentary, but yeah, he did a local news network, and then he and I actually had this is a different podcast, but when I was in college, I came back in the summer. We did a Ron and John show is what we nicknamed, a little local radio station. We did a high school basketball games, and I would do color commentary. He'd do play by play. So yeah,
Hey,
it
how
was
fun
fun.
is that, dude? Super, super fun. Hey, listeners, this is the Tim Ahlman Podcast. Pray you found a lot of value in this conversation today. If so, like, subscribe, comment. It helps get the word out about what we're trying to do in the ULC, which is continuing to learn, set habits of wanting to learn. There's always more to learn. It's a good day. Go and make it a great day. You're awesome, John. Thanks so much for the time, dude.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Appreciate you guys.